From the Logomachus Studios, it is Euro Logomachus, and the last Eurovision Song Contest seems like it just ended, but we're already talking about the next one, because if we're not talking about the contest, then we kind of have no reason to do this. So let's move forward now to 2027. I think we've beaten the 2026 contest to death as much as we can, and it's time to move forward to 2027. So what we're going to talk about today, as we are still in the very early phases of the planning of the contest, which of course will be hosted by Bulgarian national television in Bulgaria, the very simple question that people are going to want to know the answer to, which is, where is the 2027 contest going to be? So if you answer that question with Bulgaria, then yes, you're right. Congratulations. But I think we're looking a little more specifically than that. We want to try to figure out where in Bulgaria this is going to be happening. So what we have today is we have a few options, a few names that have been floated out there. And I'll point out too, we did this last year when we were talking about getting ready for the contest being in Austria. There were a number of cities, some of which were frankly not realistic candidates, that expressed interest in hosting the contest. Only two ended up bidding. It was Vienna and Innsbruck. And Innsbruck would have been a nice option, but Vienna had a lot of advantages and was just a very obvious choice. So you may find that a similar thing happens in Bulgaria this year. There are cities, a few, that have expressed interest. But as it turns out, there still may be one very obvious frontrunner. So on the screen with me now is a little map of Bulgaria. In case you're not familiar with what the country looks like, that is what it looks like. So let's start talking about the options, the candidate cities that we may see emerge over the next few months. And I don't think this conversation can start anywhere else but talking about Sofia. So this is obviously the capital city of Bulgaria. It's got a population of 1.3 million. It is the largest city in Bulgaria by far. I was just talking about when we had this discussion about Austria last year. That was very much a thing too. Vienna was a much bigger city than every other city in the country, so that was one big advantage that it had, and that is one big advantage that Sofia has here. So where might this be held? One name that has been floated out there is the Arena Sofia, which actually has hosted a junior Eurovision Song Contest. I believe it was in 2015, and it's certainly one of the larger venues of its kind in the country, can hold a crowd very similar to the venue that we just saw in Vienna in 2026. So I think that that's one option that's going to make a lot of sense for people. And of course, you know, for a national broadcaster, it's going to be probably very easy for them to throw a Eurovision Song Contest right there in the capital, ostensibly where their headquarters are. So it wouldn't be too much of a big deal for them to throw a contest right there in the capital at a suitable venue. Of course, the question that you would have to ask about this venue and all the other venues is, are they already booked for next May? And if they are, and they're not getting out of those bookings, well, then I guess they're not hosting it. But I'm not digging that deep into it. I think we're just going to do a high-level overview of some of the candidates. So Sofia is definitely going to be a candidate here. So the next city we want to talk about in Bulgaria, and let me tell you, I've been getting quite an education on Bulgaria these last couple of weeks since Dara won the Eurovision Song Contest. So I am learning a lot about Bulgaria and its people. So this is a very interesting find for me. So Plovdiv, let's talk about them next. So this is one of the largest cities in Bulgaria. It's got a population of about 330,000 people. So you can see it's also in the southern part of the country. Where in Plovdiv specifically, well, the Kolodruma, that is a name that's been floated out there. So, yeah, it's an arena, an event venue. The thing is, as I've been looking through some of the capacities here, this is definitely a smaller one. I'm seeing it topping out at about 7,500, which would be a pretty small contest. I think this past year we were somewhere in the mid teens. So, it would be a much smaller contest if it was at a venue like that. And I don't know, obviously, what the maximum capacity is, because they're going to be people like down near the stage that are going to be standing. So I don't know truly how many people they can get in, but if it's topping out at about 7,500, then I would tend to think that that's not going to be a leading candidate. So now let's move on to talk about Burgas. So Burgas, this is on the Black Sea, so on the eastern coast of the country, and it's got a population of about 210,000 people. So, in terms of venues in Burgas, in this coastal city, you are looking potentially at Arena Burgas, which, as I'm reading up on this now too, it looks like the maximum they can do if they extend out the capacity is probably around 8,000 or so. So, again, very similar to the venue that we heard about, which has been, and mind you, I didn't just pick these venues out of my backside. These are venues that have been mentioned by other Eurovision fan sources and in local media as being potential candidates to host this contest. So, for example, the Arena Burgas that we're talking about here, that was one that has been mentioned in recent weeks. So this one, again, we're looking at a capacity of about 8,000 people. So it could do it, I guess, but that would be a smaller contest again than what we're used to seeing. And finally, another city I want to talk about here. This is also on the Black Sea. This is Varna. It's got a population of about 320,000. So another one of the largest cities in the country. So this is a popular destination on the coast in Bulgaria. So you might see it if it ends up in Varna. You might see it at the Palace of Culture and Sport. So this is one, it's like a complex out there, I guess. So there's a couple of different buildings, a couple of different indoor venues, and the main Congress Hall that you have there, it sounds like the capacity is in about the 6,000 range. So again, another potential venue that is not all too big. So just for some comparison again, the capacity at the Wiener Stadthalle in Vienna, that was definitely over 10,000. So some of these other venues that I just mentioned in some of the non-capital cities in Bulgaria, those are definitely going to be smaller venues than what we just saw this past year. However, I will point out too that the venue in Basel in 2025 was probably closer in size to some of these other cities that we just mentioned, like Plovdiv, Burgas, and Varna. So I guess there is some historical precedent for it, but you also know that there are larger venues in Bulgaria than some of these other cities that we talked about outside of the capital, Sofia. All right, so let's put this all together. Early front runner, I think you would have to consider Sofia a strong favorite at this point. So Sofia just has a lot of advantages over the other cities. It's the biggest city in Bulgaria by far. It's got the biggest venue. It's got an airport. It's got the highways. It's probably got the hotels. I haven't dug that far into it yet. But it seems like they got a lot of things that some of these other cities might not. Now, that doesn't mean that, for example, a city like Varna couldn't end up hosting Eurovision. It doesn't mean that. Because, for example, I'm thinking back how I was thinking, well, I mean, Geneva is just like the most logical choice. Basel's got the smaller venue, it's the smaller city, and they ended up picking Basel. So that doesn't mean that these other cities in Bulgaria, if they bid for the contest, that they don't have a chance. It just means that Sofia has a lot of built-in advantages here, and it would probably be much easier for the Bulgarian national broadcaster to just stay right there in Sofia and do the contest from there. So we'll just have to see what they end up picking. It will probably be a few months. As I recall, the host city was announced towards the end of summer. I mean, Northern Hemisphere summer, or September, something like that. So it's going to be a few months until we find out what city ends up hosting this contest. At this point, I think you would have to consider Sofia a pretty sizable favorite, but that is not to say that these other cities have no chance if they end up bidding, because, as we've said, there has been some recent precedent for cities that maybe we didn't expect hosting the contest. So stick around right here. We're going to follow everything about this 2027 Eurovision Song Contest at Eurologomicus. Like and subscribe. Follow us on social media. We'll see you soon.